Climbing keys gets tougher the higher you go, and sometimes it's not entirely obvious what we actually need to do to improve and overcome this barrier. In this video, I'm going to cover 7 habits and strategies that I use regardless of the dungeon and season to continue growing in Mythic Plus. These go beyond specific dungeons and class knowledge and cover more broad habits and tactics that you can use to level up your gameplay regardless of what dungeon or class that you're playing. Whether you're aiming for 3k IO for that juicy mount or looking to push your way into title range, this video will include some easily actionable steps and tactics that you can use to improve your overall gameplay. Habit 1. At the risk of sounding like every male motivational video on YouTube, we're going to start with this. Mistakes in Mythic Plus are only failures if you don't learn from them. I think it's a natural instinct for us as humans to beat ourselves up when keys brick because of a mistake that we've made. The thing is though, Mythic Plus is a lot more trial and error than it is planning out perfection. I make mistakes literally all the time, and the thing that's important is to find out what happened and then adjust in the future rather than letting the mistake negatively impact us. Now, the easiest way to do this is to review your own gameplay. Not everyone is like me. I'm often recording a lot of my M+ runs for YouTube or while I'm streaming, but a tool that anyone can use is this lightweight desktop application called Warcraft Recorder. This is an app that will pretty much record all of your WoW gameplay in the background and automatically categorize it for you to review. I've lost count of the amount of times that something has happened in a key, no one's been really sure what actually went wrong, and we've been immediately able to work it out because a player in the party had this running in the background. The free version has a lot of awesome features. It's got things like clipping scenes, you can filter by dungeons and tag events like deaths so that you can easily skip to key moments. The paid version actually has some really cool features as well. I haven't seen these in action, but side-by-side gameplay looks like a kind of cool thing to be able to look into as well. We want to use a tool like this to diagnose and learn from our own mistakes. Taking a look here, I died in this pull on a +18 Dawnbreaker last week. Now, upon reviewing it, I noticed that I bubbled very early in the pull. This was likely the decision that actually killed me in the end. These Shadow Walkers are putting out this stacking debuff, and Prop Paladin really needs that immune for later on when the stacks start to get really high, because we just can't look after ourselves otherwise. So going forward from this, I knew that I needed to be more careful with bubbling early on in the pull because I would likely need it later in the pull to make sure that I could still live. Fast forward to literally today, while I was recording this video, I got into this 18 Dawnbreaker, I recalled this exact thing, I didn't bubble early on in the pull, and lo and behold, we got through it smooth sailing and we went on to time the key. Perfect example of I made a mistake in that other key. It bricked the key because I made a mistake, and yet instead of letting it negatively impact me, I pushed forward, learnt from it, and then played better next time. Habit 2 follows pretty closely from Habit 1, and that is go again. This is more of a mindset shift than anything. I talk to a lot of players that will say things like, man, I did 2 dungeons yesterday, and this tank did blah, or this healer couldn't heal or this DPS didn't kick blah. And then they proceed to avoid Mythic Plus for days because pugging is horrible. And yes, while I agree pugging isn't always a fantastic experience, the thing that gets missed by players is that as you climb higher, the probability of bricking a key rises significantly. It will get to the point where you're failing substantially more often than you are succeeding in keys, and that is just part of the process. In Season 1 of War Within, I attempted +16 Grim Batol at least 20 times before we actually got it. Last season was no different. We spent many hours in +19 Cinderbrew, partially because our comps sucked in there, but also because the key was legitimately very hard. There were a lot of points where that key could brick. The thing is, you need to take failed keys as part of the grind. Do you think that Mythic raid guilds would be killing bosses if they cracked the shits after 10 wipes? No, these bosses will often take hundreds of pulls. And yet Mythic Plus is treated a little differently for some reason, even though it is actually exactly the same. Now, if you're genuinely burnt out from keys, I'm not actually advocating for you to just push through something that you're not enjoying. But what I am saying is that people need to understand that you are going to brick keys and you just need to dust yourself off and go again. Even for myself, a few weeks back, I had a stint where basically every key I touched for one reason or another was a failure. It was pretty annoying and frustrating, but I kept going. And then last night, after coming home from playing cricket all afternoon, I got 5 different score keys done in the space of like a few hours. The thing is, you just need to keep going. Like, you're gonna brick keys. There's just no avoiding it. And treating keys like this thing that you need to succeed every time you touch them is just unrealistic and sets you up for failure. Habit number 3 is to use training dummies and use them a lot. This might sound kind of silly, and it sort of is, but there is a reason behind this. To break it down, I want us to think about our brain like a battery. We only have a finite amount of energy that we can expend, and in the context of Mythic Plus, we've got so many things that we need to be processing. We've got to think about our positioning. We've got to think about dodging mechanics. We've got to think about kicks. We've got to think about defensives and externals and juggling cooldowns for packs that are coming up and routing and all this other stuff. If we add on to that our class rotation, it becomes overwhelming very quickly. So the trick here is to reduce the processing needs wherever we can. The easiest way to do this is to get our core rotation to the point of being almost second nature. We've all had the experience of diving into a key on a class that we've never played before and basically having to spend so much time thinking about the buttons that we're pressing for our core rotation that we have no time to think of what's actually going on in the dungeon. This, to boil it down, is called cognitive overload. This is basically our brain not having the capacity to process all of that information at once, so it has a meltdown. So between keys, I want you to sit on target dummies and focus going through your core rotation. Healers also have the healing dummies. The objective here is to get the core abilities to the point of being automatic. The limited processing ability that our brain has doesn't have to expend much energy on doing the core rotation. That's something that is done without too much conscious thought, and it frees your brain up to be able to focus on other things in the dungeon, like mechanics and where to use externals and anything like that. Quick little interlude: if you want to support the channel and get a cool video shout out like Mr. Ghost Splinter over here, then check out the channel memberships by clicking on the join button below the video. Starting as low as $1, this ranges from premium access to my community Discord, early release access to videos, and video shoutouts with varying levels of complexity. Keep an eye out, Mr. Ghost Splinter will also appear again later in the video, Where's Waldo style. Alongside this, anyone who does want to join the Discord but can't support with channel memberships for whatever reason, just join the server anyway through the link in the pinned comment and send me a message on Discord. I don't want anyone to not be able to access the community because of money reasons, so all you have to do is ask and I will grant access. With that out of the way, back to the video. Habit number 4 is to get your cooldowns on cooldown. This is more of a bad habit to get rid of, honestly. I see this a lot across basically all roles of people trying to save their cooldowns for a rainy day or saving their big DPS cooldowns to try and get the biggest numbers they possibly can on an upcoming pack. There is some nuance here. You don't want to just like send your cooldowns willy-nilly, but a good rule to remember is that every second that you're not using a cooldown is a second that you're wasting that ability. And this is particularly important for low cooldown abilities. I'll use Ret Paladin as an example. Wake of Ashes is a 30-second cooldown. Let's say a pack is at 20% and you decide to hold it. So you basically want to have it up at the start of the next pull. In this situation, it takes 15 seconds to kill the pack from 20% and then say 5 seconds to run to the next pack. Great. You have a Wake on pull, you can just let it rip and do heaps of damage. The problem is you let it sit off cooldown for 20 seconds. Across the entire dungeon, when you add all of this up, this will amount to you not sending Wake of Ashes or any cooldown like this for that matter more times than you could have. While you won't do massive upfront damage on pull because the CD was a few seconds off before you could use it, your overall in the dungeon will be a lot lower because of the fact that you basically missed out on being able to use that ability as much as you could. Same goes for tank and healer CDs. There's almost this instinctive urge to save big cooldowns in case I might need them. This isn't a good approach. I'm not saying that you should just rip your big cooldowns all the time because you feel like it, but sitting on them for ages and not doing anything with them is probably worse. The saying I generally go by here is you'd rather use it and maybe have not needed it than need it and have not used it. I had this experience in Tazavesh Streets last week. I was tanking the first boss with the big adds on it for funnel. They went to use proxy strike. I thought, oh no, I can hold bubble here just in case they get another round of proxy strikes off down the track. And I died. In this situation, I should have just sent bubble. I had something to deal with that ability right then and there. They probably weren't even going to get another round of the mechanic off. And yet for some reason I was sitting on what is one of Protpelly's biggest cooldowns that has CDR tied to it because I might need it down the track. You need to be comfortable with using your CDs regularly. They're called cooldowns, not cool ups. That's a terrible joke. Far out. Habit number 5. This is one that's probably pretty simple, but I think it's one of the easiest ones to implement as well. And that is to centralize your UI. Our eyes do most of the processing when we play a game or do anything really. And our vision processes the most amount of information that is right in the center of our visual field. So if important stuff is living on the edge of your screen, you're quite literally taking your brain's main source of focus away from the area that it needs to be just to look over at this one specific piece of information. So the practical goal here is to move everything important towards the center of the screen, and then anything that isn't as important either needs to be moved away or needs to be hidden. You want things like important character buffs and abilities to be nice and centralized, with something like a weak aura, or down the track from this moment in time, the Blizzard UI thing, whatever they're calling it. Any important notifiers for casts of mobs need to be somewhere in the middle as well. Important resources for your party should also be somewhere around the central region. Alongside this, adding any add-ons which can give audio cues rather than visual cues is really, really good. I'm a big fan of things like Vocal Rate Assist or M+ Nameplate Announcer. Both are really effective add-ons at transferring things that your vision would sometimes have to process into audible cues. As we move into midnight, obviously the functionality of a lot of these add-ons will change. I'll try and keep a pinned comment below updated with different options that can do this moving forward. But in general, the more that you can move away from visual processing and use some of these other channels that aren't receiving as much information, the easier it will be to avoid your brain getting overloaded. Habit number 6, utility is king in Mythic Plus. This is something that probably gets repeated a lot in a lot of places, but I'm going to use an example to break this down to help illustrate this point. Let's assume that your group is doing 3.5 million DPS. Each DPS player is doing 1 mil and the tank's doing 500k. We'll minus out the healer just to make it easy. We're going to use Paladin as an example. Let's say that Blessing of Sacrifice could be used on another one of your DPS allies to save them from dying from an ability on a trash pack. Now, if the player wasn't sacked and then dies, they would lose 15 seconds off the timer as a death penalty. And then let's say 15 seconds while that player has to res and then run back. So this equates to 52.5 million damage for the 15-second death penalty. So this is the amount of damage that your group can do within that time window. And then 15 million damage from that individual player's contribution in the 15 seconds that it takes them to fly back. So for the cost of a single global, that Paladin player could have essentially prevented the loss of nearly 70 million damage. I won't go over every single class and what they can do utility-wise, But what I want every person to do is sit down and read over all of your class's utility abilities. How could they be used to save yourself or a team member in a key? In all honesty, I would rather take a player who passes 30s but is bang on with their utility than a player who passes 90s and never uses any externals. What you can do is hit up your class Discord, or maybe your favorite content creator who might do class abilities in detail. I know of a disheveled looking Australian paladin player who has done something similar to this in the past. My last habit, and probably the most important one really, is to nurture the community of players that you run with regularly. What I mean by this isn't necessarily to try and build a static group and push keys with, which is what a lot of people think of, but is to build a nice, solid, broad network of players that you feel comfortable and enjoy playing with. The issue I see a lot of players have here is they will complain that pugging sucks, and their attempts to build networks with other good players it goes as far as, I add this person on BattleNet after a key and they did good in that, and I never message them again, and we maybe see each other in LFG once in a while. That's not how you go about it. I'll use myself as an example. Within the OC community, I have spent a lot of time developing solid friendships with other players. I join a lot of Discord servers, I do a lot of homework keys with people, I reach out to other players to run keys with. This isn't for selfish reasons, just because I want to push up higher and higher. I do like developing online friendships, but the thing is that because of this, I, at this point in time, am very rarely pugging. In any key that I do, I generally have a rough idea of who each person is, and I'll often have a couple of people in that key that I am quite friendly with or I've spoken to a fair few times before. What this means is that even when I'm not running with a fixed group, I'm very rarely fully pugging. On top of this, if you've got a solid network, you'll often get asked by players that you've played with before to come along for a session for an evening. What this then means is that you're not basically casting the line out in LFG and catching random players every other time. You've built up this like network or this pool of people that you can pick from, making the game not only more enjoyable, but also more predictable because you know the people that you're inviting. And this isn't done by just adding people to BNet and never messaging them ever again. You have to jump into Discord servers, send people messages, actually try to build some sort of an online friendship. And if a person is a dickhead for whatever reason, just block them. You don't really want to be doing keys with them anyway, and move along. So the general final habit is to put yourself out there and make some actual friends. Don't be a closet nerd. We do play an MMORPG with a big emphasis on the MMO part. So there you have it. Those are my 7 broad habits that you can use to improve your Mythic Plus gameplay. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I appreciate everybody who watched until the very end. Until next time, gamers, take care.